Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and well, good afternoon in the UK. It may be a different time zone based on where you are. We're going to start any second now. We just want to make sure that we've got our full lineup of speakers and panelists. Hope you're sitting comfortably, and we look forward to kicking off what should be a really interesting 90-minute session for you. Okay, well, the participation count is still rising, but I think we're probably good to go because you have booked this in for your afternoon. So I think we'll get going. Good afternoon, everyone. I am not Linda Amrain Cooper. My name is Sarah Sherman. I have stepped in at the very last minute. You know how technology is. We think that Linda's probably got some technical difficulty, so I said I would cover today for the opening. So I am Sarah Sherman. I'm the director of the Bloomsbury Learning Exchange, and together with my colleagues at the LIDC and CODE, the Centre for Online and Distance Education, we have the three organisations come together to put on a second version or a follow-up to what we ran last year, all around decolonising digital education. The session that ran last year was highly successful, and we've come together again to look at what we can do next. And we felt that this time round we should really focus on the experiences of distance learners, those students that are covering multiple disciplines across global institutions, but choosing different universities to study at a distance. And so we want to explore what are their experiences of decolonisation? How is the technology that they use to access their learning, teaching and assessment impacting on them? What can we learn? And so what is for me always a pleasure is to invite actual real life students. So it isn't just the staff based in these universities, but we have some students here with us today who are going to share their experiences. We'll let them introduce themselves to you shortly. They'll tell you where they're based, where they have been studying, what they've been studying, and really how decolonisation has impacted them. If it's okay, Christine, I would like to hand over to you now as our chair for today's session. You will be looking after our panelists in the way that I know only you can do, Christine. So enough from me. I'd like to hand over.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Sarah, and good afternoon and hello to everybody. Thanks so much for taking the time to join us in this afternoon session. As it happens, I was also at last year's session, and it's wonderful that we're having a follow-up session. And of course, this year, it's great that we're able to center students' voices. That's what we like to do, and that's what we need to do as educators. So we're really very fortunate today to have three colleagues, all of whom have studied by distance. And we will be hearing their perspectives on decolonising in digital education, and we'll be hearing these perspectives based on their experiences as distance learners. So just so that we know who is joining me here, I'll just mention by name who our panelists are. We've got Conrad Francis, I've got Dr. Swati Agarwal, and Sanjeeva Singh. And I won't say much more about them. They'll all introduce themselves and tell you where they are and what they've been studying, and also give us their perspectives on decolonising. Now, in terms of the format of the session, we'll hear from each of the panelists. After each brief presentation from the panelists, we will have an opportunity to ask any specific questions we want to ask them based on what they've shared. And once we've done all of that, we will come to the end of that session, that bit of the session, and we'll then have a broader panel discussion, which hopefully will cover what they've discussed and a bit more. Now, we want you to take part in this. We want to hear your views. We want you to ask questions. We want you to share your own experiences and And let's make this a session where we're all learning, where we're all really involved, because there is a lot to talk about in this space. So without further ado, shall we start with, I'll ask my colleague Conrad, perhaps you can start us off, and then we'll move on to the next panelist. Welcome. Conrad, I'm sorry, you're on mute at the moment.
Yep. Thank you, Christy. Sorry. Thank you, Christine. Thank you, Sarah. And thank you to the University of London for having me on this panel on decolonization in education. My name is Conrad Francis. To the audience, Sri Lankan and Australian, born in Sri Lanka, studied in Australia, a two-time Olympian. Lived all my life pretty much in Australia, studying and training. In terms of work, I've been an aquatics director in Sri Lanka at the British School of Colombo for 5 years, and the head coach. And then I was moved across to Beijing to be the leads coach over there. And then I was removed again to Jakarta as aquatics director and head coach, and now at present at Seoul Foreign School in South Korea as the high performance coach. Been in education, all my life, and I've enjoyed it. I think there is a lot more in education that we can give as educators and as past national athletes. And in terms of studies, I'm an alumni of the University of London. Graduated 2 years ago in international sports management, and alumni of Swinburne University of Melbourne in Australia in sports management, and then again and studied again in Japan at the Nihisa University. So I've been in education. I've been in high performance studies, and for me, decolonization as an expat, lived all my life since the age of 14, it plays a big role. And I think it's important, that we, when I say we, that I embrace it because each country that I lived and each country that I worked, the environment is different. The education system is different, and, the communities are different. And when you take online learning, the reason I enjoy online learning is because as an athlete, as an educator, we learn from each other. And communities, learning from different communities, different styles of teaching, different styles of responding to different topics. I think that sums it up in decolonization. And that's where we learn. That's how we learn. And that's how I learn. And learning never stops. It's all about knowledge and sharing knowledge and on common grounds. And of course, there is always a debate that goes on. And I think that's another important fact when it comes to decolonization in education, online studies. And if I was to give you an example, when I did my PGC, the cohort that I was in, we had a few Olympians and a few managers, sports managers, and one of them was from Manchester United. And just learning from where he comes from and how he looks at it in his perspective, in his eyes, in his zone, and that alone, it took me by surprise, because the way they run things, the way he looks at it in the bigger picture and how I look at it at the bigger picture, it's two different scenarios. But there is no right or wrong answer in that, because end of the day, when the program director, Dr. Oscar, came into the picture and he said there is no right or wrong answer, it's just the way we look at it. It's the perspective of one's thinking. And that's the beauty of decolonization in studies. And, for me, why does this matter? I think decolonization fits into the broader goals of reconciliation as outlined by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which is important. and schools are vital sites of decolonization and student empowerment. I think that's a very powerful statement when it comes to decolonization. And if you look at the key points, decolonization is the process of pretty much the undoing of colonization practice within the educational context. Taking that context, confronting it, and challenging the colonization of practice that have influenced the education in the past and in present. So that's how I look at decolonization and how it has that impact in the world that we live in. And if you touch base AI, if you look at AI, that it's a broad spectrum of a debate that goes on in schools. AI pretty much does everything you want. Do you study, do you learn from it, or is it just making education much more easier? Do students actually do the research, or do they just type in the question and get the answer? So it's a broad-based, should I say, it's a broad-based topic to talk about. And I think and from my perspective, I think decolonization and online learning, I have enjoyed it personally, and I continue to enjoy it, and meeting new like-minded, fellow students, fellow student athletes, professionals, and that network building, I think is very important when it comes to decolonization. And it's a point where, for me, it was from 1 to 10, but I never realized from 10 onwards there was much more in learning. And that's the effect that I had from decolonization, from the course that I did from the PGC. When I asked the question why, everything, it comes to rationalization of why. So questioning why is very important in the present world, and especially when we come to certain topics. And that's my outline of how I see it.
Thank you so much for that really very, very interesting and very introspective look at decolonization from your own perspective as somebody who has traveled very widely and had different experiences of education in different parts of the world, and therefore different cultural experiences as well. So thanks so much for that. Colleagues, does anybody have any specific question for Conrad at all? Anything that we want to post on the Q&A or in the chat function? Well, perhaps whilst people are thinking or wanting to or focusing their minds on this, Conrad, you talked about decolonization being really important for the empowerment of students.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah, and yeah, so maybe you can expand on that a little bit, because I think that's a really powerful thing to say.
I think it for me, how it empowered students is doing that research, learning from that research, then rather handing it over, saying, okay, here is your answer. But instead you give the topic and you dig deep into it, you do your research right to the depth, find the roots. And especially when it comes to assignments, that's how I looked at it. How did it begin? Where was the origin? Then when you start breaking it down, looking at the timeline of whatever the topic it was, then you start realizing, okay, there has been an effect all along. There's been involvement all along. And that alone, is decolonization, and how from one generation, it has moved across to the present. And I think that is very powerful. And especially with the students right now who are on board on this program, I think it's important to take on board, knowing that it's not just about writing the assignment, writing the answer, but knowing the history and the background of it. And I think that incorporating that into your answers, into your responses, I think takes a long way, especially when it comes into the marking scheme. Because as the lecturers and as the professors who mark your papers look at what you have done before and how you started, how did you get into this topic, and what was the process. And I think that is important, and I think that's a vital piece of advice that I give back to the present students and to the student athletes, that knowing that decolonization and knowing the power of decolonization gets you a long way, especially when it comes to assignments and for markings. And that's something I learned afterwards when Dr. Oscar gave me the inroads again. This is how we do this. And I was like, yeah. And yeah, so I think that's a vital piece. And I think that's something that I think we as a community should take on board. And, and I think it's our duty to give it back and to share this piece of knowledge. And and I think that's how we evolve and we begin to learn and make the programs much more interesting. Should I say the word interesting? And wanting to learn more, wanting to be in that process.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that. Now, we've got a couple of questions here, but actually looking at these questions, I think they're questions which would benefit from responses from the whole panel. So colleagues who've asked the questions, if you don't mind, I'll just hold on to these questions until we've had the other presentations, and then we'll ask them of the whole panel. Okay, right. Well, I think let's move on then. Thanks for that, Conrad. We'll come back to you, of course. So our next panelist who's going to speak to us is Swati Agarwal. Swati, over to you.
Yeah. Hi, is my slide visible? Yeah, okay. Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. And today I'll be talking about my experience as a distance learner. So before I start, I would like to give you a brief introduction about myself. So first and foremost, I am a learner and a firm believer in the fact that life is a continuous process of learning, unlearning, and relearning. I have bachelor's and master's in computer science engineering and doctorate in the field of AI, and have extensive experience in research and teaching at State University in India. So while I was researching within AI and health, I was awarded the EU-funded Marie Curie postdoc fellowship in 2021, which led me to Europe. Now, it was totally a different experience for me. Transitioning, so last year I transitioned to a teaching position. While I was teaching in Asia for almost 14 years, and when I started teaching in Europe, I embraced Europe's student-focused environment, which was so different from what I was used to experience in Asia. So as an educator with a background in teaching computer science related subjects at university level, my journey from Asia to Europe has not just been a change of geographical scenery, basically, but it was a kind of a profound exploration of contrasting educational landscapes. So since I'm into teaching undergrad and master students as well, so I wanted to learn more about pedagogy, and because of which I pursued a course in postgraduate certificate learning and teaching in higher education by University of London. And today I'll be sharing some of my experiences as a learner. So my experience with distance learning has been quite enriching when it comes to incorporating diverse perspectives and voices. The digital platform was designed in such a way that it gave me access to connect with my fellow colleagues, gave me the access to a wide range of resources from around the globe. I was able to engage with my other participants, which came from a variety of cultural backgrounds, and we used to have a very interesting discussions in the discussion forums. And always there is a possibility to listen to lectures from professors from different countries. So this has certainly broadened my understanding and appreciation of diverse viewpoints. What I think is that if looking ahead, so it's quite crucial that in addition to the existing diversity, which is there within our students, we should also continue to diversify the voices that shape our education. Ensuring that learning is as rich and as varied as the world we live in today. So I think that this screen should be a window to the world where all the knowledge is valued equally. So we should always, my thinking is that if you're able to incorporate diversity, not with the people who are shaping our education, that will be quite beneficial. And while I was taking this course, it always felt nice to experience the accessibility features making learning equitable. It was so easy for me and so flexible for me. I could very well follow the course at my own pace, in my own space, alongside managing job and my personal life. So I think this is a very good feature of the online distance programs that we have, they are so flexible, and they allows us to follow courses that we wouldn't be able to follow if we were to attend physical classes. So I think that going forward, we must continue to innovate, ensuring that every student has the tools they need to change their world, like subtitles for the hearing impaired to interactive content for the kinesthetic learners, maybe. So we have to keep pushing our continuous improvement in accessibility and personalization. And my last take is on democratizing the knowledge. So digital education has the unique ability to democratize the knowledge, allows us to access and engage the information beyond the traditional power structures. So having said that, digital education, though it has the potential to be democratic, access to technology and reliable internet remains a significant barrier for many, which means that the promise of an all-round inclusive education is yet to realize for all the learners that come from low resource settings. So I think that as we move on, we should work towards reducing this digital divide by providing or facilitating access to necessary technology, things like internet connectivity, especially for the students in the low resource settings. Maybe offer course materials and support in multiple languages, provide translation and interpretation services to make this digital education much more accessible to non-English speakers as well. So these were the 3 points that I wanted to talk about today in my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Swati. That was really very, very comprehensive, and it's really, again, very interesting to hear your experience, and in many ways it maps onto a lot of what Conrad said in terms of his own experiences, and that diversity of voice and that diversity of learning from other students obviously seems to be a feature of online learning or distance learning that you found quite important. Colleagues, any specific questions that we have for Swati and her presentation? I'm still holding on to the 2 that were posed after Conrad's presentation, and I will come to them.
Maybe we'll do it after all the 3 panelists have spoken.
Yeah, I think so. Right, I'm just having a look. Let me see. There's a question here which perhaps, Swati, you could probably answer this one question, and it does speak to what you said about diversifying of the voices that shape education. I think you talked about the importance of doing that. Now we have a question from Dihya Choga. I hope I said that correctly. The question here is, did you find the teaching materials diverse as you were studying? In other words, have there been any moments when you felt that the course material was addressed to Western students rather than non-Western students? Did you feel that at all
In my course, I would say to a certain degree, the material was diversified, but majorly I would say that it was having more of Western component in the teaching or the material that we were having access to. Yeah.
Right. So in terms of that diversity of voice shaping your education, perhaps, did you feel that was something that was missing a little bit? in
Yeah,
that
because
context?
I think so, because most of the case studies that we used to discuss in the class, or the examples that were discussed, so most of those examples came from the Western world. And so I personally think that we know that how much important diversity is, and everybody has their own perspective that enriches the whole learning experience. So the same diversity, if we are able to incorporate in the people who are designing the courses, think of the enrichment of the information that students would have if the structure has been designed in such a way. Yeah.
Fantastic. And I can see a thumbs up there from a colleague. Right, Linda, you have your hand up. Welcome.
Hi. Apologies for arriving a little late. It was a problem that I had to resolve. But I just wanted to first of all thank everybody for being here and just respond, engage with the question, because as somebody who leads the program that Swati attended, one of the things that we've really grappled with on the program is that we recognize that the program itself takes a quite Western approach to the philosophy of education as an education subject. In developing teachers, we are bound, or we're grounded within a Western perspective in terms of developing teachers. And so my feeling is that it's not just about the resources that we're grappling with, but it's also about the worldview, the mindset around the ways in which we as teachers in higher education can support our learners, and that's certainly been something that we as a program team have grappled with and have often had conversations with our students. And it's been very helpful to get feedback from students, but I think there's a long way to go. And I really appreciate Swati reminding us about that. As a program team, we need to be reminded that this is something to move forward. It's interesting because it's a degree within the UK system, and it is aligned with Advanced HE's professional standards framework. And so that itself, that alignment with the professional standards framework, does put a particular worldview in place. And so it brings me to think about questions around the professional standards framework itself. And what I mean there is not specifically about that particular framework, but it's whenever you have a professional body recognition framework, it could be accountancy, it could be law. In our case, it's related to higher education, teaching and learning. That starts from somewhere. It starts from a context, and in this case it started within the UK. It started within the UK higher education system. It was developed by colleagues who were largely based within the UK. Now it has had a fantastic international impact, but again, these questions keep coming back to us. Where are we in terms of decolonizing the professional bodies with whom we work as well, and those frameworks? So I'll stop there. Apologies for rambling a bit there, Christine.
No, Linda, it's thank you so much for all that you've shared. And in actual fact, I'm just looking at some of the comments that we've got here in our chat, and they do resonate so much with a lot of the things that you said. And you might have also seen the thumbs up and the like signs that were going on as you were speaking. We've got comments here around co-creation with students. We've got questions around how we can exploit that digital learning environment in order to support more inclusivity by students. So all of these things, I guess, are the questions that we're all asking ourselves in terms of how we decolonize that digital learning space.
And just to add on, sorry, Christian, just to add on to
Conrad,
that,
please.
I think it's what's best for the world, right? End of the day, it's what's best for the world, and it's global citizenship. I think that's where we sum it up: what's best for the world and global citizenship. And I think when you take education, I think as educators, we don't look at the broad spectrum. We just go like Linda said, the context, but it affects down the chain, down the line, it does affect the students, and it does affect the teaching, the modules. And I think that's something, we need to sit down as educators and look at the big framework. And I think it's all about making it simpler, understanding, and breaking it down to those micro teaching, micro learning. And I think that would definitely help, in the digital world, in education and in the higher education system.
Fantastic. Thank you, colleagues. Now, I'm conscious that Sanjeeva has not given his presentation, so there's a lot for us to talk about. We do have quite a number of questions and comments in the Q&A box, which is fantastic. So what we're going to do is, colleagues, I'm going to hold on to those, and we'll ask Sanjeeva to speak. And once we've done that, we can then have some questions specifically for him, and we can also go back and look at some of these questions, which I think will benefit from all of our input in any case. So Sanjeeva, on to you. Welcome.
Hi, good evening from India. I think it's a wonderful forum where I really want to thank the University of London and all my colleagues who are here, our professors who are here, whether it's Oscar, Giorgio, and others who have really helped us. And I basically am a mechanical engineer. I did my mechanical engineering. Thereafter, I went on to did my MBA from XRI, which is one of the premier institutes in India. Basically, I belong to a very remote area of India. And that is an area known as Uttar Pradesh. It's a very remote area in a village. So therefore, I can connect you right from a village to a University of London. So that's the diversity you're looking at. So I started my career. I was a sports lover. So I did my archery. So 1982 Asian Games. I saw the Asian Games and I got really inspired by that and went on to adopt archery there. And since then, I've led the Indian team in both the Olympics at Atlanta and the Seoul, and went on to set up various academies across the country, training youngsters for the Olympic dream. And currently, I'm the high performance director with the Government of India, looking at the development of archery in preparation for the Paris Olympics. So I would like to cite a very, very beautiful example which came across. It's a small story. It'll take you a few minutes to cite. This was the period. It was the COVID period, in India. And I was one of the topmost archers, the coach, both the awardees and the Arjuna and Dronacharya awardees. So I was there, and therefore my Director General of the Government of India asked me, Sanjeev, what can I do to educate the sports people? Now for us, sports on the field. So for me, it was a challenge. How do I create sports which is on the field to an e-learning module? That has never happened in the last 100 years of India. We never had an e-learning module for sports. And there, what was the challenge for me, that it was shown to me that, why can you create an e-learning module for the people in the COVID time? They can learn sitting at the homes. We got 20 people across India, 20 cultures, 20 different people from different diverse backgrounds. And we all came together to create the first e-learning module for the country, which is known as the e-Khel Pathshala, so that anybody across the India can on a mobile app, they could connect and they could ask a question and learn about the sport. So every day from morning, afternoon, 12 o'clock till late at night, 2 in the morning, all 20 of us coaches from spread across the India, we used to come together. We used to be talking to each other, getting case studies, getting case examples, creating series. And then finally, at 8:30 in the morning, I used to present a 1.5 session on one aspect of coaching of archery. So that is what really, that first instance of e-learning, I came to know from that, the first instance of, and that is from where my story starts, when I connected with the University of London. Because as a high performance director, I wanted to learn more about what's happening, because Western world is far more accomplished in terms of Olympic medals compared to the developing nations. So my idea was to learn from the Western world. And there were 3 things which I finally, if you look at the story of e-Khel Pathshala, which tells you about digital learning. The first is inclusivity. The second is diversity. And third is innovativeness. This e-Khel Pathshala was all about innovativeness. We never had thought about sports and digital learning in sports. And here it was, creating a digital learning for the people across India. Diversity, because people in remote places across India, we could connect, and include inclusivity because we got in people from colonization is all about when you look at digital learning. The first thing you come across is inclusiveness because you have people as a colleague from across the world, sharing experience, sharing diverse knowledge. So that is bringing a different perspective, a different viewpoint. That is about how do we bridge the gap. So that was bridging the gap when we came to the University of London and started learning my PG certificate in international sports management. The second was diversity because we were having professors from different backgrounds, professors from different culture. When we were looking at case studies, these case studies it had more, as Swati and both Conrad mentioned, it was more about the Western aspect. But then we were learning from them because that was the first time we were learning. But there again, the silver lining is that can we have more of case studies from across the world, from developing nations, so that the bridge in decolonization is divided. It's no more looking only at a Western aspect, but you're looking at the viewpoint across the world. That is very, very important. And innovativeness. Now, innovativeness could be, in India, we call it jugaad. It's a jugaad technique we started. It's a very simple way. We want to do something, we create something around, suddenly a challenge is thrown, and we come out with some ideas how to do it. Now, those are small innovations. I'm not saying invention, these are small innovations, but these innovations about e-learning can really take the world to a different, as we said, we go to global citizen, we are looking at knowledge spreading across different strata. And as Swati pointed out, one of the accessibility issues which we face in India is because many of the remote corners are still not connected with the Wi-Fi, still not have the internet access, may not have the computer literacy. And that is where we are trying to bridge the gap. How do we make it more simpler, more innovative? How does the education become so that everybody across the world can benefit from it? For me, decolonization is all about how can you make it inclusive, how can you make it diversify, and how can you make it innovative with viewpoints from across different structures. Thank you.
Sanjeeva, thank you so much. You've said it all, and you can see all the clapping hands that are coming up because you have highlighted so many things that, as a colleague has written here, in many ways are almost becoming a basic, equitable, human right. People having access to digital tools in order that they can also access that education that others are able to access. Wi-Fi, bandwidth, those sorts of things. And those small innovations that would be of such help to somebody in the global south who does not have that really quick bandwidth or that Wi-Fi and so on. These are things that we really need to be able to get over in order to make that education that bit more inclusive and that bit more accessible to everybody. So thank you for that. Colleagues, I've got a number of questions in the chat, and I think they're applicable to all of us in this panel. So what I'm going to do is, so I'm sure, Sanjeeva, there'll be some that'll be very specific to you, as if I keep scrolling down. Let me see. Right. Okay. So I'll just ask a number of these questions and we can discuss them as a panel, and colleagues online can also obviously post more stuff that they would like us to discuss. So the first thing I'll ask is around that online learning. Now, this is very much about your experiences as online learning. It's often seen as an isolated experience. So what tools and approaches for networking online allowed you as students, as online learners, to engage in exploring the more sensitive questions around decolonization? Did you feel you were able to do this as students?
Yes, I think so. I was able to do it very well because, with my because I was heading as a high performance sports director for the Olympics, I was looking at ways and means to restructure the national federations. I was looking at ways and means to do the e-learning within the country. And what happened was, when I looked at different diverse, when my colleagues were from all over the world, and whenever we used to discuss on a forum and we used to put on a discussion topic, they used to give us the feedback, and they talked about their area, how they have developed that sport in that country, in that particular region. Now that really threw up a lot of ideas to me. And let me tell you what happened was, the last 2 years, what I was able to do was that first thing what I did was that my entire, when we learned from the first module, which we learned was the governance and leadership module, and that the feedback from all my colleagues helped me to improve as a national federation, we were able to put in structures and systems in place to create subcommittees, create a long-term vision, create a long structured program for the 2024 Olympics. So all that happened because we were able to, and then we worked on the, what I learned from some of the colleagues was, and I started working on a WISE program. WISE was about women enhancement participation for the Olympics. So I needed more and more women. So we created a woman vertical. We started women national archery event where only women could participate to tap the talent. This was a learning which I got from my colleagues there, which was able to implement. Then we started robust financial management. So when we studied the financial module, what we did was we started registering all the players. We were not registered, so we created apps to register the players, put a one-stop solution for anybody going on to any event. They can gather all the information. So we were able to do that. The biggest learning which I felt, which I came across there, was on the sports marketing. India archery was not very popular. What I learned from sports marketing was how do I create an immersive experience for a fan base. And when I spoke to all my colleagues from all across the world, we got insights into that. And therefore, I started doing social marketing. We never went on the social marketing, but I created small stories about our champions of a 3-minute video. And they started making it viral across India. Anybody now because mobile is such a thing, which was everybody, even a rickshaw, a very low strata person in India also has a mobile now. So they started viewing. Our viewership went down to 3 million people. We created stories about our para archers, and one of the para archers was the Sheetal Devi, the first armless wonder girl of the world. We created a small storyline. If she can do it, why can't you? And that was a storyline which went viral across India. It went on to the biggest show, which was Kaun Banega Crorepati, which was shown by Amitabh Bachchan, the greatest film star. And we had 30 million people viewing it. And so many calls I get because people thought that maybe if I am handicapped, can I do sports? But that opened a vista. And that happened because I learned how to actually, through my sports marketing, that I should go into the fan immersive module. How do I create them engaging the fans there, engaging the people in India? And that's what I did. I engaged the people, do the 3-minute videos, making it viral, getting film stars to come in, getting on the TV shows. That is where we made archery popular. And today we are getting a lot of funds, a lot of sponsorship, which is helping me to develop the entire sport across the country. So that is the beauty about learning from what the Western world was done, and how do I use that Western world, whatever good things from there, into our developing nation, and then seeing how to make it into a mega sport. And today we have more than 10,000 people getting jobs, more than 20,000 people have adopted archery, and today we are the world #1 in terms of the compound archers, world #2 in terms of the men, and the world #3 in terms of the recurve. That is where we had taken India in the last 2 years, thanks to the University of London and to the various modules which I learned through them.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Sanjeeva. Other colleagues, Conrad, Swati, what was your experience? Sanjeeva is a very specific example of that adapting and that innovation around the networking that he experienced. What was your experience like?
Yeah, I would like to share mine. As I told in my presentation, that I have been into teaching and research in Asia, specifically India, for 14 years before I came to Europe. And then I got a permanent teaching position in Norway. And it so happened that after teaching for 14 years, you are quite confident, you know how to deal with the class, how to deal with different students. So you have a particular mindset, and I was very confident with that. So the first day I entered my class, and whatever I had learned in all those 14 years, I knew I can handle the class. So in my attempt to personalize, I asked students their names and then started interacting with them. And it so happened that we were in the middle of some topic discussion in the class. I called out one student by name and said that, can you please answer this? Which was very normal in India. Nobody minds. It's very normal for teachers to call out students by their names. But then immediately, once my class was done, I got mail from the students saying, we are not very comfortable if you call us by names. Then it struck me, there is something missing in my, so probably I just need to adapt. I need to understand, where am I going wrong? What worked for me in Asia? Why is it not working in Europe? Where am I going wrong? That's why I enrolled in the course of the University of London. And then the course was designed in such a way that the designers probably understand that these are the things that instructors face. So it was very meticulously designed, and we were supposed to write down our experiences, what challenges we are facing in the discussion forums, and how are we trying to overcome that. And while we were posting our answers, other students coming from different cultures, different experience, different diverse backgrounds, they were also giving their own feedbacks and sharing their insights, how we can handle it. And the readings were such that it gave me a new perspective of how instructors should understand the diverse student body and how is it different from the one that we have in Asia. So basically, it's a very different educational landscape. So when I moved to Europe from Asia, it was not just a change of geographical scenery. It was a total change in the educational landscape as well. And the learning material and the feedback that I used to get from my colleagues has helped me design some ways and methods to adapt my teaching, to handle different students. So much so that now I am nearing the end of my semester, and students are super happy with my teaching, and I do get so many good feedbacks from the students. So it is very gratifying and satisfying for me that, yes, I got to learn a lot from my course. Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks, Swati. I can see great thumbs up there from Linda. Obviously, there's a vested interest here, Linda, but it does sound like very much the positive experience here around the diversity of voice and the diversity of thinking was very much to do with the design of the course. You know, it didn't just happen. It was that the course was deliberately designed to allow students to share their own experiences and to draw from others' experiences and different backgrounds, which I think is a really important element of decolonizing. It's allowing that multiplicity of voice, multiplicity of experience, you know. So I think that's a really important insight that you shared there. Thank you. Conrad, do you have anything to add to this particular point?
You know, if I was to take Sanjeev's and Swati, you know, I'm pretty much in the middle of both, you know, being an aquatics director, you know, especially during COVID, you know, nobody predicted COVID. And, you know, when you're the high performance coach and the director, you know, and when it hit us, you know, it takes a step back and, you know, what do we do next? You know, in terms of physical education, in terms of coaching. So, you know, it's a diverse community. And so what I did was, you know, reaching out to a lot of the Western world coaches, to the high performance coaches, saying that to the Asia Pacific, and of course to the African nations, you know, where I have a lot of mates who are coaching. And we came to a forum, and the forum was a digital platform that we created so that coaches around the world who are in the education system, you know, can continue to support the education during COVID. And how did we do this? You know, like-minded. So we categorize as high performance, age group, nationals, learn to swim, and then of course the PE teachers. And we broke it down. And into that system, we pretty much put in the theory of breaking down of for example, how do we streamline and kick? How do we push off diagrams, processes? And if you were to click, let's say streamline, that will open up a new platform saying, okay, streamline is pretty much hands out, diagonally straight, feet pointed, pushing off, and so on. So we had a lot of systems in place so that, you know, students were not all about, you know, forgetting what it was to do online learning, where they were, you know, physically in a swimming pool, because it's a different sport. You know, swimming is all about, you know, being in the water, but how do we mimic this on land? So we did a lot of research on this. A lot of coaches came together. I think we almost had about 150 or 160 coaches who came together, and we designed the platform, and it is still continuing. We still continue to do such programs, especially in Sri Lanka, to the rural. We use this platform, and few countries in Asia and in the African region. And I think that's what I think that is the context. The context was, if you break it down, the context was the group of coaches coming together, like-minded coaches. How do we go to the next step? How do we put this out to the world, to the community? How does others reach out, take this information and decolonize amongst everybody else? And I think that's the important part. And I think, the PGC taught me all this before COVID came in. And, then you start thinking, okay, hang on a second, how do I do the financial management into this? How do we gain finance to support the system? And the sports strategy and governance, that's a big part that plays in, when it comes to sports and in education and in high performance. So we had those tiers in place. And of course, we had chairs on the board, and we had a set of governors. We had educators. We had high performance coaches. And finally, we had coaches that would be totally neutral and who would look out from the program and say to us, okay, we are missing a certain part. We are missing, how do we interact with the parents? Where is that link? What do we do? How do we support that link to the parents if they have questions and answers especially during physical education? So we had that support staff, and we had a 24-hour coaching system online where a question is asked, we reply back. So that's how I looked at it, and that's how we got through the COVID, and then we realized, this wasn't too bad. It was not that hard, but starting it up, getting it up and going, running, and now, you look back, what's COVID? What was COVID? Any challenge, you throw any challenge, and we are ready for it now. And when you have systems in place, it's so much easier, than rather, if you look back 20 years ago, you would never think of this. So, and I think that's how digital education has changed the world, and how, like I said before, it's how we look at it, the perspectives, and how we see it, and how we can make it a better place for education, to have it free for all.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, panel colleagues, for sharing all of these experiences and perspectives. We have a lot of questions and comments coming in from colleagues that are online. Let me see. I've got a question here for you very specifically, Conrad. And essentially the question is, you have worked in many different countries, as you told us. Now, if you had to sum up how inclusivity and decolonization works best in online and distance education in practice, from your experience, what would you say? Given all the experiences that you've had.
I would do it 1,000 times. I love it. I absolutely love online learning. And I think it's much more interesting than physically being in a class, because I believe each one have their strengths and weaknesses. Some don't want to talk in front of the class. And then when you're online, you say what you want to say. There's no right or wrong. And, it's giving that time of forum where, you have 10 discussions happening at the same time. Each one is chatting, or each one is giving their input. And then it gives you that opportunity to choose which person you want to have that further discussion or that conversation, because you can gel with them. You have the same like-minded, but the rest of the 9 look at it in a different perspective. It's how much you want to learn from that X or Y person or X or Y athlete. Getting that information and putting it in your toolbox, saying that you have that other 9, and you take information only that you need, where it's going to support you in my learning, in my journey. And that's what, being in so many countries, studied in so many countries, lived in so many countries. And I think that's the beauty of digital learning and, decolonization. And till today, we are all mates, we are good friends. And, who are my lecturers are now, we are like buddies, we don't even call, we just call by names. And we have these topics all the time, discussions. And, and I think that's what has, got me where I am today, to have that open, broad-minded of thinking. And it's not only about the Western world, but taking Asia, because Asia is a big part of the world. And I think we tend to forget about Asia. and there's so much to learn, so much to gain, and so much information you can take, and I personally believe the information that we have in Asia, and if we can put it into the Western world, I think it's a great combination, and it gives that extra bit of exposure for students, wherever you come from. And I think that is one area of importance. I think we need to look at it in the future.
Thanks for that, Conrad. Now, following on from that, I've got a comment here from Oscar, whom you'll know, at least Sanjeeva and Conrad will know. And I've also got a similar question from Stanley. Now, Oscar is pointing out the fact that, complete human knowledge cannot stand only on the pillars of Western knowledge. It needs much more than that. And, we need to be able to draw from our diverse range of perspectives and traditions. And then Stanley's question is very much along those lines, how can we integrate multiplicity of diversity in terms of that contextual knowledge that we're having in our teaching? So what are your views on that, panel? How can we just incorporate that multiplicity, of voices in terms of that contextualized knowledge? And Linda, you might have perspectives here as well, of course, as an educator, other than as a student, but any thoughts on that?
I can start briefly if that's okay, but this is about
please.
the student perspective on this. But one of the things that strikes me is that what we've heard from all three contributors are some fantastic examples of the way in which collaboration was facilitated through the digital context. And it did allow for different perspectives and different voices and different contexts to be brought to the table and for mutual learning to happen. And we've then seen in all three cases application of that learning in the individual's context, which I think is really powerful. But going back to Oscar's point about the legs on which we stand, I think my concern is that so often the theories with which we're engaging are being contextualized to individual contexts, but we're not necessarily always engaging with the theories from those contexts. So what we're doing is taking the Western theory and thinking about how that might be adapted and applied within a particular context, whether this is marketing or teaching or sports management, whatever the subject area is. What I'm very, very keen to see, and I feel is, a huge thing that I need to keep working on all the time, absolutely all the time, is how we start to work with the pillars, which are actually the theories coming from other contexts, other locations, bringing in those theories and not just an engagement with Western theories and then interpreting it. Does that make sense? So that, I think that's one of the challenges I feel I need to keep on with.
Can I say here something?
Yes, of course.
So see, I'm going to take again back to India, and I'm going to take you back to a small village in India where I belong to. Taking a learning from what happened in my University of London course, I have taken digital education to the remotest area of India. I have started the first e-learning school in India for the poor children, for the migrant population, which are labor class. That what we have done is we have taken smart TV. What I created was we took smart TV in the classes while it's very much there in the Western world and in all my urban schools. But I took the smart TV to a rural child. For a child, whether he belongs to a rural, a peasant, or a migrant labor, or a mason's son, whether he's studying in urban or anywhere in the world, a child is a child. The only thing what we did was we tried to give him a 3-minute video lessons on nursery rhymes, on things, bringing in diversity. And what we got tutors who were from the village. People initially came to me and said, how can you teach English to a village child? You don't have English speaking teachers. I said, but why can't we train our teachers, our rural children? These are the diverse, why can't we train them into English and then prepare them? So what we did was we created a learning course for the teachers, and the teachers are now training these people. So we have a 3-minute video coming on the smart TV. The same thing gets repeated on the blackboard. So that's the way a rural child is getting learning, similarly as he could have got in USA or UK or anywhere in the world. So through digital education, what I learned, I have tried to practice it and created the first e-learning school. And my children, which are only 5 years, 6 years, and 4 years old, they're doing wonders. They're now speaking in English. They are putting the entire thing across. They are able to communicate. Of course, time will come. I'll show you some videos, maybe not this time, but next time when I get a chance, that what has happened in a remote area from digital education.
That's amazing. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Linda, just to comment a little bit on what you said, I do agree, actually. And to a certain extent, I guess decolonizing in many ways has to be about that decentering of the use of those Western theories and Western frameworks and so on, and allowing for the centering of other frameworks and other theories, so that we're not just slightly tweaking our Western theories and frameworks and so on in order to fit into other settings, but actually allowing other theories to be centered and for us to learn through those, and for us to have those as part of our core curricula, as it were. And I think that's really important, and that's a huge challenge. So, given that it would require us, well, obviously there's that collaborative working with colleagues from other parts of the world in order to understand their knowledge and to center those bits of knowledge, and also thinking about our own institutions, our own education institutions, and what we value, what we consider to be knowledge, and recognize as knowledge, really. So there is still quite a lot to do there. Now, colleagues, we've talked quite a lot about different voices, diversity of thoughts and opinions, and we touched a little bit on technology. And there are a few comments in the chat about technology. Now, one thing that's been going on, of course, is around the rapid advances in technology, in distance education, in online education. And we can't have a session like this and not talk about AI, because this is where we are now, and it has transformed learning in every sense, and more so online and digital learning. So in your experience, what are your views about the equity of access to technologies by students who are distance learners, particularly the students that are from different parts of the world? If you think about where we are with AI now, and think about the speed with which things are moving, what about our students who might be in the global south, that might not have that access to the technology, might not even have the bandwidth to access the internet all the time, like we imagine our students in the global north do? So just some views and thoughts about equity of access to these rapidly changing technologies.
Yeah, I would like to answer this.
Please.
So AI in education, if we talk about, it's like a personal tutor with a silicon soul. It adapts, it learns, it tailors the experience to fit the learner. Having said that, AI is definitely very powerful, but with power comes great responsibility. So whenever we are designing any AI-based solution, let's say if we talk about education, we as designers should ensure that it should become a bridge, not a barrier, to equity of access. We should ensure to safeguard the biases, to safeguard against biases, and to ensure that everybody has equal access to the information. But with the kind of the digital divide that we see in low resource countries, definitely it will take a lot of time to ensure that we have sufficient technology available there so that everybody can equally access the information which is there on the digital platforms. So I think we need to work on providing sufficient resources so that technology can deliver solutions equally to all the learners, I would say. Yeah.
But one of the aspects of Swati of artificial intelligence will also be looking at the way technology is becoming. Wellness is a very, very important part of digital learning. With digital learning, what is coming is the more you're facing the screen, the more you're doing. There are issues regarding health issues which are coming in. So AI can also help in ensuring that any health issues can be predictive, and you can actually enable a better digital experience, in that aspect. What do you have to say on that?
Yeah, I mean, we have many wearable sensors available today that tells us that if anyone is driving, we have sensors that tells that whether the driver is feeling drowsy or not. So the driver would be alarmed as soon as the sensor detects that the driver is drowsy or sleepy. So definitely because of the technology, we have so many possibilities. We need to find the right balance that integrates all the components in such a way that it is useful. It becomes useful for the people who are using it. And definitely, we need to be self-aware of the fact that excessive usage of screen definitely is not good. So we need to be balance in that as well. So that requires self-discipline, I would say. Because I see children just swiping their screen shots after shots, and then they would spend 2-3 hours in a day. So, I mean, if they can't self-regulate, nobody can, I guess.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing those thoughts on AI and on technology, colleagues. I'm just looking at our online chat here. We still need, this is from Elizabeth Charles, we still need critical digital citizens to make appropriate use of such tools. Education should teach those critical skills and well-being behavior, which is really very important. Exactly what you said so much. Right, Linda, you have your hand up, and then I'll go on to the next question that we've got here. Linda.
Thanks, Chair. I was just thinking about this question of access to AI, but actually I see that as part of a whole range of access to digital. So in a way, it's no different. It's part of the digital divide. AI is just another tool in which there is a digital divide, and within individual countries, there's that huge divide as well between the wealthy who have access and those who don't have access. And I think one of the things that we can do within higher education is we can provide opportunities for people to demonstrate their own learning in a variety of ways, which are appropriate to their context. So, for example, on both of the postgraduate certificates, what we're asking and the students here are joining us from, we're really asking people to contextualize to their own, to write about marketing in their own context, to think about marketing in their own context, think about governance in their own context. And by doing that, we are empowering people to write authentically from their own experience and from their own local context and experience. And I think that can help to break down some of the barriers, because inevitably there are always these barriers. There are always people who can pay more for more technology, and that's kind of always going to be the way. So we need to think round that problem rather than confronting that problem head on, because we're never going to be able to have absolutely everybody having the same access to technology. It's not going to happen. So thinking of ways around the problem are going to be, I think, important. And that personalized experience, people writing from their own experience and applying, as we've seen some fantastic examples here, I think are going to be really important in that.
Yeah.
If I was to add on, being in the education, as an educator right now, I see many students using AI, especially, writing assignments, essays. And, you as an educator and being in a leadership team, we pick up quick, going, hang on a second, this is not your writing. This is, and now it has a significant effect on the student, because it's either make or break, and especially when it comes to exams. because they will find it difficult because they've just put the question in, got the summary, put it on paper, all right? But as an educator, we find ways, and we know, because we have the history of the student and we know how the capability of how they write. So doesn't this, it comes to that question, doesn't it affect the student later on? Because it's supporting and it's just giving a free pass, right? It's a very big debate in schools right now, in terms of AI. It's students that, who find it difficult in English, for example, in writing. You bring in AI, they type in the answer and they give it in paper, and you just sit back and go, hang on a second, So where do we draw the line? Where do we draw the line? And it's the same effect that, it's going to apply when it comes to higher studies. Where do we draw the line? Because when it comes to plagiarism, you can't tell the student what you did was wrong, because AI is supporting the program. AI is giving you the answers. So it's something, you got, as an educator, I said, in education, you got to think long and hard. Do you support it? Is there a certain percentage that you give that you could use AI and get that information? Or is there another back door, how we can work around it? So it's a very tricky situation. And I think, and that's something, it comes into digital learning. And I think it's something very, very important, looking ahead, how do we address this situation?
Absolutely. I agree. It's pretty much what both Linda and Conrad, you've talked about here. It's all about just, a lot of it is about how we design our teaching, how we design our assessments, with these tools and these resources and the rapidly changing nature of them in mind, and also the divide between our students and accessibility of all of these things in mind, such that, that the student who has access to everything at the drop of a hat is not at an advantage over the student who has got a huge amount to share and of course has got, a lot of personal, local, contextual knowledge that they can share, is not disadvantaged just because they don't have access to this shiny new thing that has arrived. So it's really, as you say, one does need, as an educator, to think long and hard. There's a huge amount of reflection and planning and designing that needs to go into these things in order to bridge that gap.
Yes.
Yeah.
But AI in the times to come, there will be a dispute, because still it is costly. AI, if you look at artificial intelligence and how it is, accessibility is there. Still, there's a great divide among the developing and the developed nations. Within the countries also, there's a large divide. It's not that everybody has access to it because it's costly. And as you rightly pointed out, that, how do you, when you look at the growth of a student, does the growth of student signify based on the answers which he has taken from a chat GPT and just cut and pasted and given, to a person who doesn't have that access and working day and night to create the answers and go to the research and then coming out with the answers, which could be done in a jiffy by a chat GPT. So the question is, how do you monitor the growth of a student? These are challenges which are going to be faced by schools, by colleges, by educators, as they come across, while there's the enhanced requirement for AI, but at the same time, there's a challenge which needs to be looked into. And I'm sure all of us are looking into that.
I think in this regard, the onus lies on the educators themselves, because what I have been experiencing as an instructor, that's everybody has an access to ChatGPT and different versions of it. So what I have come up with is, I design an assignment in such a way that there is no direct answer to those questions. So whether you have it or you don't have it, I mean, ChatGPT. So you will have to put in your brains, you will have to search, and you will have to find the answers. So I end up getting the answers which I can say that, students have actually written themselves. So we need to judiciously use AI. Definitely, it's a very good technology that enables your learning, and it's very useful. But we as an educators have to design the exams and sessions, assignments that, Linda is asking me something maybe.
Absolutely. Yeah, Linda, you want to come back in?
No, I think Sanjeev had also put his hand up, so I'll...
Sanjeev,
so
did you...
my only question here was that while the Western world is looking at artificial intelligence in a big way, how do you make it simple for the people who can, when you look at decolonization, it is all about how the education and knowledge is transferred to the lowest person in the rung. If that happens, and that is where we will have to put that knowledge, put that artificial intelligence and all other technology which are coming in, that should be ably assisting, decolonization of the entire, digital education. So how do we do that? That will be a question mark. That is what we are going to do, how the technology moves up the ladder.
Yeah, I think that's a discussion for another another session. I don't think we'll get the answer here today. Linda, did you want to come back to this question before I go to the next one?
Just wanted to raise one question, which I don't feel that we need to answer, but is the question of plagiarism actually a Western construct? Is that actually coming from a particular theoretical and cultural and moral standpoint that isn't necessarily seen in the same way around the world? And that's one of the issues I often think about when working with students, as we have at the University of London in 190 countries. Plagiarism and understandings about what appropriate academic practice are not the same in different cultures and different places. And at the moment, we're all very concerned about AI being involved in plagiarism. But I'm just thinking, can we push back on this question about plagiarism? It's a question for this kind of event where we're thinking about decolonizing.
Oh, absolutely. Gosh, I think that one will have to be the one following on from Sanjeeva's question. Linda, deconstructing the notion of plagiarism. Does it matter in academic practice? Does it not? And then how does that fit into decolonizing? A big question indeed. Now, we have got about 10 minutes before we have to end this session. There was one question in the chat, which perhaps we might attempt to say something about. I'm not sure we'll be able to answer this question either. If I can find it, initiatives, let me see, excuse me, I've lost it now. No, right, here we are. So the question here says that, many programs offer decolonization as a standalone module that's taught, rather than an idea that's embedded or that permeates the design of the programs. And this person is essentially asking, this colleague is asking, how can program leaders integrate decolonization right from when they design programs? I think as a starting point, I'll say it needs to be embedded. And this, our colleague is quite right. It's not something that you just teach and you have as a standalone thing. It's something that you embed and you weave into your teaching. So how do we do that? Is what our colleague is asking.
In India, what we did was we were looking at ways and means. When I started this e-Khel Pathshala, we were looking at how do we ensure that knowledge is transferred to everybody. So we have to look at government funding, we have to look at sponsorship, we have to look at ways and means where education and knowledge can be transferred, irrespective of diversity, irrespective of, to make it more inclusive, if we can make it free. So we need to come to a way how we can bring down the cost in such a way that it can be more accessible, or we can make through the various government programs, through the various sponsorship program with the top-notch sponsors, how we can make it free. That's one way to decolonize the entire education sector. At least things which are priority, things which we are must to do, that has to be free for all.
Right. Yeah, thanks for that, Sanjeeva. I can see that would make a lot of sense. It would be the right thing to do in that setting, that context that we're discussing here. Any other comments or thoughts about that?
Just to add on, I think when you come to context, I think it's not just one person who comes with the context, and I think it should be a group of studies, a research group of studies that put together that should build the context. And when you build that context, I think you've got to look at so many elements, from the, not just from this side, but you got to be able to look on the other side of the wall. How do we approach this? And I think that is I think that's something that I think is very important when you build a course, a digital form, because it's we as educators, we try to go down to the level of a student. How do we think like them? Because if you can put your brain into their minds and to think how they think, how they approach, I think that is the key right there when you do the context, because that is important, because not each and every one of us have the same IQ, because we're all different, we're all unique, and I think that's the beauty. And if we can reach to that level, and build that structure, build that foundation, and build it upwards, I think that is your success program right there. And I think that is where students just want to know more about the study, want to learn more. Okay, hang on a second. This is what they're teaching us. This is the structure. I think I have a place for me in here, and I think I can learn much more. And I think that is something I think course directors, universities should look into one area. And we are doing it right now as educators in our school. We look at it in a broader spectrum. We have a group of faculty who look at AI, for example, AI, the positives, and we have another group, the negatives. And we normally have a forum where we sit down and we draw the common line. So same thing, when we do the structures, I'm an assessor for CIS, for councils of international schools. So we look at it that way, how do we have a successful program? What's the foundation? It's not just dumping all the context in, but is there a meaning to the context? That's the question we need to ask. Is there a meaning to the context? And what is it? What is it that we give out? And what is it that the students learn or engage? And what is the knowledge that they gain from us? I think that's something that we need to look in the future.
I think so what Conrad has said just threw something in my mind, and I just wanted to discuss this. See, if you look at from the whenever we are doing research work, as you saw, most of the research was coming from the Western context. How can we invite the Eastern context into that entire thing? It's not only about Western. So the more we make it, inclusive, I think so. Then you should put, whenever you're looking at any program, when we are designing a program, the first thing should be, who is my customer? A customer is not an English-speaking customer. We need to understand that there are so many dialects across the world. Can we make it multilingual? First thing, very simple example. When we there's a course material, it comes in English. If I get a webinar, comes in English. If I get a video, it comes in English. But is there a possibility? Do you think when you are creating the context, that is somebody in India, somebody in Spain, somebody in France, somebody sitting in Algeria also watching the same video? Maybe his English is not good, but the converting that into a multilingual, that itself will make the disparity vanish. That will create a less divide. So one is putting in the research, bringing the colleges in the eastern, in the far remote areas. Can the colleges be brought into, so that something that they have done gets involved in the research work? And secondly, how do you use language as a barrier to break that ice, and can we make it accessible to more and more people?
More like exactly, more like a multilingual course.
Exactly. Thanks for that. Swati, did you have anything to add before we wrap up here?
I think I'm facing the language barrier like anything, because I speak my own language, Hindi, and I know English. And here in Norway, everybody speaks Norwegian. Even the grocery shops have everything written in Norwegian. So it's very hard for me to navigate in such a setting. But fortunately, I work at university where I can manage with the English. But talking about the decolonizing, I would like to share one small experience that I had while teaching this course on AI to undergrad students. So for this subject, I gave one capstone report type of assignment at the end of the course, wherein I asked them, whatever they have learned in this AI course, they have to pick up a problem from their daily life that they experience, and how their knowledge that they have acquired in this course can be used to develop any AI-based solution. So conceptually, they have to think, and everybody is coming from a different region. So I have students from different parts, and now whatever they have learned in my course, they are taking that knowledge into their own context, into their own regions, and thinking of different ways of how AI can be used as a solution to tackle that problem. So I think more of such attempts needs to be done. Yeah.
Fantastic. We couldn't end on a better note than that, actually. I think you've really said it all, and you've summed up to a large extent a lot of the things that we've talked about here. There are a few things in the chat. Linda, to your point, a colleague has said, most research and academic standards are Western-centric. Most rules are made by Western academics, and they're expected to be adhered to in order to be validated by them. So we can park that one until that next seminar that we're going to have, that next webinar. And there's Tim, I'm afraid we won't have time to talk about this, but it's very interesting asking about the topic of assessment. Could we think about renewable assignments, which allow students to contribute to the public domain, such as creating open education resources, conducting practical research, addressing local community issues? And could this be a useful tool in decolonizing learning? And if so, how would we take this forward? So a lot of interesting thoughts to think about. The language barrier is one that somebody had also raised earlier on, about that using one language as in our case here, English, as the language of instruction. Is that right? Should we think about this in a more inclusive way in order to make it more accessible? So a lot to talk about. It has been a really very interesting, very educational panel. Thank you all for all that you shared. And Linda, thanks for finally getting on board. I'm so glad you were here, because of course you've given us that additional perspective as an educator as well. So colleagues online, thank you all for joining, and thank you for your contributions. And to our panel, thanks very much indeed for your perspectives. And we hope to see you at the next decolonizing session. Thanks all.
And Christine, may I thank you for chairing so wonderfully, and can I also thank my colleagues in the background who have made sure that this session works. Sarah, Shireen, Julia, and Claire, who've all been involved in bringing this event to a very successful conclusion. It's been really exciting. Thank you very much, everybody, and it's great to see Code, LIDC, and BLE collaborating like this. I think it brings the institutions together really nicely, and the organisations together.
It does.
Thanks very much, everybody.
Fantastic. Thank you all.
Thank
all
you.
the best.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining in, and thanks for listening to us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.